What was the learning curve when trying to explain market mechanics to a skeptical public?
It was all very steep. I had no financial background, had been in community journalism for going on 10 years. Folks at the New York Stock Exchange took a chance on me. They took a chance that I could come in as a layman and learn the story of the stock exchange and how it worked and be able to explain it out to the general public in layman's terms and to the press. The stock exchange was a great learning environment. The staff was filled with subject matter experts, people as expert as anybody in the business. The trading floor was filled with members who were eager to tell what they did and how they did it and help journalists understand how the market really worked. So it was a great environment to learn, and I enjoyed all that learning. It was a great opportunity.
Did the NYSE feel invincible when you joined?
I don't think anybody ever felt invincible. The exchange had a great franchise, a great global brand name, and wanted to build on that. Certainly, folks had seen that in the crash of 1987, that there wasn't enough public understanding of how the market worked and what had happened. So there was a lot of education to do. There was a lot of testimony given throughout 1988, 1989, and I think that accrued to the exchange very well. The New York Stock Exchange was preeminent at the time, and in a different way than the stock exchange is today. But back then, the mission was really to help journalists and the people that the journalists are talking to, by extension, to help them understand how the market worked and the benefits of bringing together buyers and sellers in a centralized auction market where they can compete.
What was it like to be the big dog on the block with NYSE?
There was both obligation that came with it and responsibility, and you had to live up to that. It wasn't just a bragging right. For example, my first day at the stock exchange, I remember an officer of the Human Resources Department telling me, "All right, today's your first day. Today and every other day, you'll be expected to be the very best at your job of anyone anywhere," which felt a little intimidating at the moment. But over time, I got to see that everybody really aspired to that standard. You were the New York Stock Exchange. You had to do the right thing the right way. That's kind of the mentality that everybody seemed to approach their work with.
You bought the exchange's first laptop and Bloomberg terminal. What was the reaction?
The laptop was really just a matter of being practical. Every day, it was part of my job to do the exchange's daily news summary. And I had a long commute. Along the way during that commute, I would hop off a train, pick up a newspaper back when newspapers were sold in newspaper stands or boxes, and hop back on the train, read through the papers, and do my daily news summary when I arrived at work. Instead, the laptop enabled me to write as I was on the train. Although the thing, it was a Toshiba T1000, it weighed what certainly felt like 20 pounds. It probably didn't weigh that much, but it felt like it. But I thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And it enabled me to get my work done in a much better, more efficient way. The Bloomberg terminal was the signal of the press environment changing, certainly, and the information environment changing. What had happened was that at the time, the New York Stock Exchange had required of its listed companies that they report material news via Dow Jones Newswire or Reuters or AP. Those were the approved sources. At some point in the 1990s, I began to get calls from our market watch folks and our market operations folks that news was also running on this thing called Bloomberg. I had no visibility into what was running on Bloomberg. And soon after that, I was getting calls from Bloomberg reporters about various developments in the markets. So I pitched bring in a Bloomberg machine. I think at the time it cost $1,200 and change per month. And I happily, people granted me the budget to do it. And it really began to get people to see news differently, I believe. The environment was opening up the channels were growing in number, and information was moving through the market in a much faster and broader way than it had been previously.
What was the idea behind turning the opening bells into global media events?
There was competition among the exchanges for listings. The New York Stock Exchange had the lion's share of the companies that were qualified to list on the stock exchange, but there were also, at that point, many NASDAQ companies that did qualify to list on the New York Stock Exchange. So that was part of it, was to offer those companies another benefit, another that NASDAQ at the time could not offer. And that was to offer them the visibility that came with the New York Stock Exchange, the television networks that we were bringing in to broadcast live from the trading floor every day, the boardroom where you could host analyst conferences and meet with your most important investors. Those were benefits of a physical location in the heart of finance, where the critical mass of buyers and sellers were coming together that nobody else could offer. The other part was to offer the existing listed companies a benefit and a relationship that the exchange really it was part of the relationship with the listed companies that we hadn't offered before. And that was to use the exchange's visibility platform to create visibility for their own products and services. If they were rolling out a new line of products, what jumps to mind is the Gap, the clothing store. The Gap was rolling out its Gap at Work casual business clothing line. And we worked with the Gap on a promotion where the Gap provided khakis for everybody on the trading floor. And it was all in service of creating a wonderful photo that the AP took and ran around the country, which was the entire trading floor in khakis. So 3,000 people in khakis, all crowded onto the New York Stock Exchange trading floor, announcing something that was very important to the Gap. That was a huge benefit for a listed issuer, and a huge feather in the relationship.
Did traders see live television on the floor as an intrusion or a badge of honor?
I think it was a little bit of both. The traders, had a very, very important business to tend to. You didn't want to get between a broker and a stock at a specialist post, because they were on a mission. They were representing a customer order. You didn't want to slow that down or impede on it in any way. At the same time, the general public was very interested in the financial markets. It was the 1990s. The bull market was raging. Every year, trading volume was increasing. Every year, scores of newly issued public companies were going public, and so there was this thirst for the information, for the content, for the images that we could provide. So bringing the TV cameras to the trading floor was a bit of a gamble on Dick's part and Bob's part. It worked out well, because over time the traders got to see the benefits of that visibility. Their businesses increased in value. Everybody saw the exchange as the place to be, the place to list your company, the place to send your order versus some other exchange or platform. So benefits definitely did accrue to the entire enterprise. But you did have to elbow your way through a few crowds to make it happen sometimes. Traders were a little concerned that they were providing information that isn't widely available. It was widely available if you had a quote machine, or if you were watching the tape, but there was certainly some trust to establish, and a working relationship to establish. Reporters do have a different interest than the members on the trading floor, and just recognizing that and learning how to work together, that was the key to it, is establishing that trust and recognizing, hey, we're both here with different jobs to do. Let's just be professional, and over time You saw people like Bob Pisani developing extremely strong relationships with the members and both sides benefiting from that.